Hello, everyone. Ben Bryce, joined by Ryan Etner, to give you your midday mayhem on Thursday, August 15th. So, Ryan, these markets are all over the place. They've been brutal, especially for the grains here. What are we seeing today? Is there anything good? Is there any good news out there?
The bean exports were good this month.
Yes.
Yeah, a little over 1.5 million tons. That's the fifth week of improvements in a row. So that's a nice reason to get a little bit of a bounce here today.
Yeah, we're seeing, those beans have been getting hammered, right? They were dancing around 10, and they've shot through that number. And now that we kind of pushed through, we got to 955 yesterday, I believe, give or take. But here we are today. We finished higher yesterday, finished higher again today, like you said, on good export sales. Is this bean market turning around?
Yeah, it might be a little bit early to say turning
Okay.
around. I would say the very first step, what we want to look for is, let's talk corn for a second, because in corn, we've already found that when corn bounces a little bit over 4, you hit heavy resistance.
Yes.
And that could very well be cash selling as, dumping of old crop, maybe. So beans, the first step is to find out when you bounce, when you hit that cash selling, that first level of resistance. Because we've been straight down, we don't know where that level is yet.
Okay. So a little bit of a difference between corn and beans there is that corn's kind of seemed to have found its area where it can get up to, and until we can get above that level, that psychological $4 mark seems to be an area where guys are, like you said, maybe it's cash selling because there's a ton of grain sitting out on the farm. So maybe it's not necessarily farmers that are looking at selling it, but elevators that are buying it from farmers, then turning around selling it, because you also have on the other end of that, the farms are record short at 353 a month ago.
Yeah.
And now they've been quietly digging themselves out of that without much of price movement to the upside, which is rare for when the funds are buying back. Especially when they're buying back like they are. You don't typically see the market continue down or move sideways. So you are being met with seems like a lot of fundamental producer selling, what like you said, whether that's on a board or cash, it seems like the psychological level seems to be coming into play.
Yeah.
All right. Now, when we're looking at grains, wheat harvest is going to start picking up. Minneapolis, right?
Yeah.
So is there anything out in the wheat market that we need to be careful of? Seasonal trends we need to be watching?
Well, actually, what they've been glued to recently is watching the overseas wheat. And I think you and I have talked about that before in our comments here. If you look at overseas wheat charts and you look at our wheat chart, they're pretty close to the same. In fact, overseas wheat hit new lows for the year yesterday, and our wheat didn't hit new lows for the year, but fairly close. It seems like maybe we're starting to get away from that a little bit, level off, but I would say that's the number one factor to watch right now.
Is that because we're starting to see things get hot again over in Russia and Ukraine? You have Ukraine moving into Russia. Now, they've got forces within Russian territory. And then you also have Russia shooting those ports again in Odessa, those major export ports. So, this wheat market, is it going to get crazy? Because wheat tends to be one market that swings pretty heavy when you see a headline.
Yeah, like this morning, we reacted to a headline from yesterday that the Odessa ports were attacked again. That's a good one line, headline bounce. The key thing that's kept our wheat and overseas wheat as well under pressure is the slow increases to Russian production estimates. Now that they have combines going, we're getting an idea that all that frost concern from a couple months ago just really isn't there.
Yeah, well, these headlines about Russia and Ukraine aren't like it was in the beginning of 22 when it was every day, it's a big swing. So we're not saying we're going back into that sort of trade, but maybe more slow and less emotional trade out of those headlines.
Yeah.
All right, so shifting away from the grains. Give me some good news on this livestock.
The cattle finally do have good news. We've had enough higher box beef reports to put us at 20-day highs, especially this morning. That came out right before we are recording this. That came out higher. Kept you right there. Has packer profits a little over $8, and over a year and a half, we've seen when that packer profit level gets over 7, they will pay higher. Now we're starting this morning with a lower cash bid, but we haven't seen any of the cattle feeders take those lower bids yet. So there is still potential that on the higher box beef, they may raise those bids.
So there was a lot of fear maybe beginning of last week, right? When we had the whole flash crash was one down day, one major big down day in the Dow, the S&P, all that good stuff. We saw the same thing out of cattle. Now it seems like these equities, these financial markets are starting to get a little bit more strength in them. we seeing a similar move? Can we tie those two together with cattle and the equities?
I'd say for the most part, we only want to tie those two together when the equities make a major move, like you mentioned on that Monday.
Yeah.
Sure, yes, cattle will pay attention, but I still think it has to be a major move or a long sustained move.
Okay.
But the day-to-day chop, cattle are kind of still focused on their own thing. Yeah.
All right. And energy too, right? I mean, we have an election cycle coming up. It's not really a shoe-in like people thought we'd have for Trump maybe a month ago. Kamala Harris is campaigning very well, and she's starting to gain some traction. They have opposite views on what happens with energy when they get into the market. Yeah. So as we start getting heavier and heavier, maybe really starting after this Democratic convention here next week in Chicago, right? Yeah. Are we going to be focusing more so on energy then, you think, when it comes to who's leading the polls? Or are we still going to be focusing on production out of the Middle East or maybe out of Russia?
I think that will add a new wrinkle into this, which we haven't traded yet.
Okay.
Or, we've seen a few headlines move us around a bit, but I think that we'll start adding headlines we should be watching, that's for sure. Otherwise, always pay attention to see if OPEC's saying anything new. But
what are the stocks looking like?
Yeah, it's another thing we should be watching.
Definitely. Okay, so keep an eye out for that over the next few weeks as we start getting really heavy into that election cycle headline news, which is going to be craziness here starting in September. I think. So, guys, thank you for joining us. Brian, thank you for being here. If you guys have any questions, give us a call. I mean, we pretty limited on what we can say during these podcasts, so more in-depth, more specific conversations can be had if you guys give us a call at 1-800-2-MARKET. That's 1-800-262-7538, or check us out online at allendalehub.com. Thank you.